They say you can still see the light some nights. Pale, flickering, low to the ground like it's searching for something. The bone lantern, they call it. A name whispered with the kind of careful respect you'd give a snake sleeping across your front step. I saw it once. This was years ago, before the town swallowed up the trees and the last decent road through Hart's Hollow got paved over. I was passing through, staying a night in the hills when I heard about Silas. An old man with a shack deep in the trees who didn't want company but never seemed surprised when it showed up. The cabin was more a shadow than a structure. Wood stove heat, no cell service, and a single busted solar panel that powered a radio and exactly one overhead light if the day had been sunny. He didn't say much, but he didn't need to. Some people carry their warnings in silence. Every fall, right when the air started to turn and the leaves crisped at the edges, he'd light a fire and sit quiet, just waiting. That was the night he told me about the lantern. He didn't call it that, not at first. He just said, "You ever see a light out in the trees that doesn't throw no shadow? You come inside, lock the doors, and don't say a word till morning." I asked if it was some kind of will-o'-the-wisp thing. He shook his head, said those were different. Curious, maybe even playful. The light he meant was older, hungrier. "It don't float like a ghost," he said. "It walks, low to the ground, stays between the trees like it's afraid of the open. And if it sees you, it'll follow. Not fast, not close, but it won't stop." I pressed him for more, but he just stared at the fire for a long time. Then he said something I never forgot. "There's rules to it, always have been, but people stopped keeping them. That's the trouble." The next day, I asked around the hollow. Most folks gave me the usual mix of shrugs and warnings, but one old woman, Miss Arlena, who sold honey out of her shed and was older than the dirt it sat on. She looked at me like I'd stepped on a grave. "That thing still walking?" she asked, voice thin as paper. I thought the bearing tree had taken it back. When I asked her what she meant, she waved me inside and made me tea that tasted like burnt cedar. And then she told me. Long time ago, before there was a town, folks up in the hollow followed old ways. Said there were things in the woods that didn't like to be seen, didn't like to be named, and definitely didn't like to be ignored. So the people made deals, small ones. A bowl of milk left on a stump, iron nails in the doorframe. And once a year, on the first new moon of fall, they'd light the lantern. It wasn't just any lantern. They made it from bone, deer spine mostly, hollowed and carved into a cage for a candle made of tallow and ash. You'd hang it from the oldest tree, the one with roots like a clutch of hands. Let it burn through the night, and whatever passed through your woods would keep passing. But then, the wars came, and the roads, and the church with its clean hymns and tidy graves. The hollow emptied out, and the old tree fell in a storm. No one lit the bone lantern after that. Except sometimes, it still burns. Places like that don't write things down. Their stories live in low voices, in glances across the table, in half-told warnings. I've spent a long time following stories like these, the quiet ones, the kind people don't admit they believe. Some are true, some just feel true, but most of them, the ones that stick with me, they all begin the same way. Just a few steps beyond the fence. I didn't believe her, not really. Not until 3 nights later when I saw it for myself. It was past midnight. I'd gone out to use the latrine. No indoor plumbing, remember? And there it was, maybe 50 yards into the tree line. A small, bone-colored light. Low. Flickering. I thought at first it was someone with a flashlight, but the light didn't cast right. No spill, no beam. Just this tight little glow like a candle in a jar. Then it moved. It didn't bounce or swing like someone walking. It glided, not fast, but steady. And it stayed between the trees, like Silas said, threading its way between trunks, pausing every so often like it was sniffing the air. I backed into the cabin and locked the door. But that wasn't the end of it. An hour later, I was still wide awake. I couldn't sit still, kept pacing between the front room and the side window. Eventually, I stepped onto the porch again, just for a breath, just to prove to myself it was still out there. That's when I saw it again. Not in the woods this time, but closer. Right at the edge of the clearing. The glow wasn't bright, but it was enough to see the frost steaming off the ground around it. I turned to go back inside, but something made me stop. I looked over my shoulder, and there, where I just walked, the light now stood. Same distance from the trees. Same angle. Like it was retracing my steps. I moved again, slower this time, eyes locked on it. It didn't move with me, not right away. But when I reached the door, I looked again and saw it had shifted. Not closer, just adjusted, like it was lining something up. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Silas gave me a bundle of twine, a candle stub, and a curved piece of deer bone. Told me to hang it at the edge of the property. Said it wasn't the lantern, but maybe the memory of it would be enough. I did as he asked. That night, the light came again, but it didn't get close. It stopped at the edge of the clearing and waited. I watched it until dawn, and when the sun came up, it was gone. I haven't been back to the hollow in years. Silas passed, the cabin rotted, and the woods aren't woods anymore. Just the back edge of a new housing development. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind blows just right, I swear I hear footsteps in the leaves. Soft, patient, searching. I still hang a candle every fall. Not because I believe, but because something might. The locals don't call it by name. They just say the town, like it's the only one that ever mattered. It sits just far enough off the map that GPS gives up a few miles out. The road in is gravel, then dirt, then just packed earth with grass growing through the tire ruts. No one stumbles into it. If you're there, you were meant to be. There's a town out near the edge of the forest. No sign on the way in, no population listed. Just a weathered wooden post that says, "Welcome back." I spent 3 days there once, long enough to know not everyone who leaves stays gone. The town has a church, big one for a place that size. Brick and wood, red shingled steeple, and a bell that rings every night at 9 p.m. 12 chimes, exactly. Not one more, not one less. But one night, there were 13. I was there for an interview. Local paper had a job opening. Editor position. I'd been bouncing from place to place, and something about a quiet town tucked into the hills seemed like exactly what I needed. I checked into the inn. Room key was old brass, number etched by hand. The woman at the front desk gave me tea without asking and told me not to mind the bell. Said it was just tradition. That first night, I heard it. 12 slow, even chimes. I counted them without meaning to. The sound carried clean through the walls. It wasn't spooky, just present and heavy. The next morning, I asked someone about it. A man sweeping leaves outside the general store. He paused, then said, "It's how we keep the count." I asked, "The count of what?" He looked at me, then at the sky, and went back to sweeping. The town didn't have a mayor, not officially, but everyone pointed me toward an older woman named Clara who ran the library. She wore heavy sweaters and looked like she'd been carved out of the building's foundation. When I asked her about the bell, she said, "Some stories stay buried because they want to be. But sometimes something shifts, and they surface." I didn't know what to make of that, but I wrote it down. I wrote a lot of things down in that town. Most of them never made it to paper. The night of the interview, I was back in my room going over notes. It was almost 9. I remember glancing at the clock as the first bell rang. I counted, like always. 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 12, and then 13. It wasn't a mistake. It was lower than the others, longer, like it had to crawl up from somewhere deeper. I waited for someone else to react. A shout, a light turning on. Anything, but the street outside stayed dark. The town was still. The next morning, the woman at the inn didn't speak, just handed me a slip of paper with a name on it. I asked who it was. "She was here," she said. "Last night." That's when I realized the guest book at the front desk had a second column. Names, then tallies. Some had 3, some had 6, some had none. I flipped back a few pages, each name written in the same tight script, followed by neat marks, vertical lines, always spaced the same way. A few names had been crossed out entirely. A few had numbers so high I stopped counting. And then I found mine. 1 tally. A single fresh mark like a score on a prison wall. I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't seen a pen. My hand was cold. The book smelled faintly of burnt paper. I went back to Clara, told her what I'd heard, asked her what it meant. She didn't blink, just said, "It means someone stayed who shouldn't have, and now we're off by 1. She handed me a small tin whistle. Old. Dent in the side. Said if I ever heard the 13th bell again, I should blow it, but only once, and only before the last chime fades. Otherwise, she said, you'll just bring them closer. I asked, "Them?" Clara looked out the window. "You ever notice how quiet the town gets between chimes?" That night I couldn't sleep. I left the window open, watched the street. 9 o'clock came. The bell rang. 1, 2, 3. 12. Silence. Then I heard it. 13. The sound rolled through me, made the hair on my arms stand up. And this time, I heard footsteps after, slow, dragging, from the church, but not on the road. They were walking through backyards, taking their time. I held the whistle in my hand. My breath shook. The metal felt cold, too cold, like it had just come out of the ground. I could feel the indent from the dent with my thumb, over and over. I didn't blow it. I don't know why. My mouth was dry. My heart was beating high up in my chest, like it had gotten stuck in my throat. I kept telling myself to move, to act, to do anything. But I just stood there, locked to the window, staring at the shadows between houses. I didn't blow it. I don't know why. Fear, maybe? Or maybe I wanted to know what would happen. I stayed at the window until dawn. I didn't hear the footsteps again. But the next morning, someone else was gone. I knew because the inn had a new name in the ledger, and the tallies had shifted. Mine now had two. I left that afternoon. Didn't take the job, didn't pack, just drove. I haven't been back since, but sometimes I wake up at 8:59 p.m. No alarm, no reason, and I listen. When I was 13, my folks sent me to stay with my cousin Jake for the summer. He lived on the edge of nowhere, a patch of dry hills and empty fields about a half-day's drive from the nearest grocery store. His parents ran a struggling cattle farm, and I guess they thought some sun and dirt would do me good. Jake was a couple years older, the kind of kid who drove tractors before he could shave and always had a BB gun slung across his back like a second spine. I looked up to him. He didn't say much, but when he did, you listened. The farm next to theirs, Turner Farm, was abandoned. Big property, cracked silo, a half-collapsed barn, 2 rusted trucks swallowed by weeds. People didn't go near it, not because of danger, because it was quiet, the wrong kind of quiet. Even Jake, who once kicked a bull in the nose for eating a sandwich, didn't like talking about it. "You ever hear it?" he asked me once, out of nowhere. He just looked past me, out toward the fence line. Exactly. I started noticing it too. No birds, no wind. Even the bugs didn't seem to cross into the Turner fields. One time I saw a rabbit make it halfway across the yard and just stop. It sat there for hours, didn't move until nightfall. Jake told me the Turners were quiet folk, said that's how people describe them. Way back. No yelling, no music, no laughter. They'd nod in church, then go home and never speak again till next Sunday. One day they just stopped showing up. House went cold. Livestock wandered off. Place is dead, Jake said. But sometimes you can still hear the barn door close. A week before I went home, Jake dared me to spend a night in the old barn. Said it was a tradition, kind of like an initiation for anyone who stayed more than a month on the farm. He even offered me his old sleeping bag, a flashlight, and a little spiral notebook. "You hear anything weird," he said, "write it down. Don't try to remember it, just write." I laughed it off, but I agreed. I mean, what's a barn going to do? He dropped me off at dusk. The sky was turning purple, and the fields looked flat and endless. The barn was massive up close. Sagging wood, splintered beams, a rusted weather vane that never moved. Inside, it smelled like dust and metal. Not hay, not manure, just old air. The ground was covered in brittle straw that didn't crunch underfoot. That was the first thing that got to me. I set up in the center, beneath a crossbeam where a hayloft used to be. No animals, no tools, just empty stalls and a ladder that went nowhere. I wrote a bit in the notebook. Dumb stuff. Barn smells like pennies. Jake owes me $5 if I make it till sunrise. Around midnight, my flashlight flickered and died. It had fresh batteries. I know it did. That's when I noticed how loud my breathing sounded. Not because I was panicking, but because everything else was so still. No rustle, no drip. Even the dust felt like it was holding its breath. I tried to sleep. I woke up, or maybe I wasn't really asleep, around 3 a.m. I didn't hear anything, but I felt it. Pressure, like the room had gotten heavier. I sat up and looked around. Nothing moved, but my skin prickled. I turned slowly and saw a figure standing just inside the far stall. It wasn't doing anything, just there. Tall, human-shaped, too straight. I couldn't see a face, just the outline. And even though my heart was hammering, I stayed still. Maybe if I didn't react, it wouldn't either. Then I saw another. To the left, and a third, further back. They were all facing inward, toward me, Not moving, not blinking, just watching. I don't remember how long I stayed like that. Could have been minutes, could have been an hour. But eventually, the blackness behind the barn slats turned gray, pre-dawn. The light didn't make them disappear. It just showed more of what they weren't. Their limbs were wrong, their shoulders too narrow. Heads tilted like mannequins that had been stored too long and bent under their own weight. I stood slowly. The straw didn't rustle underfoot. I walked, one step at a time, past the stall, past the shape. I didn't look them in the face. I couldn't. When I made it out the front doors, the morning breeze hit me like a scream. Jake was waiting at the edge of the property. He didn't say anything, just handed me a thermos of coffee and drove us back. Neither of us brought it up again. But 2 days later, I found the notebook in my duffel. I didn't remember packing it. There was a new entry at the bottom of the page. Same handwriting, same pen. They don't leave. They just wait for you to come back. I've told this story maybe 3 times in my life. Never the same way twice. Not because I'm lying, but because I don't think it wants to be remembered clearly. Some stories are like that. They wait, hidden in barns, in basements, in spaces that should echo but never do. And when they come back, it's never loud, it's quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you lean forward, that makes you stop talking, that makes the skin behind your ears go cold. The kind that spreads. These are the stories I hear the most. The ones no one writes down. The ones you only learn if you know who to ask. They don't begin with a scream. They begin when everything else stops. And if it ever stops for you, you might already be beyond the fence.